The Toronto Raptors have made a move, bringing in Otto Porter Jr. from the Golden State Warriors, that NBA championship team, on a 2-year contract, which I think is a massive pickup for this team. So I'm going to break down who Otto Porter is as a player, how he could potentially impact this Toronto Raptors team, and what this means for the Toronto Raptors going forward throughout free agency. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, breaking down the latest Toronto Raptors news. And that, folks, it's time to celebrate. People were wondering if the Toronto Raptors were going to pick someone up with that extra bit of cap space, that MLE that we had, and it happened. And we're bringing in a guy that I didn't think would even be available, given the fact he just won a championship. He's a veteran player. I thought if the Golden State Warriors were going to let someone go and someone was going to outbid the Golden State Warriors, it'd be Gary Payton II. So that's who I thought the Raptors were targeting last night. But no, it was well, Gary Payton did get picked up by the Blazers, so I was right in the fact that they were willing to let him go. But they also let Otto Porter Jr. walk. And this is the reports coming in from Chris Haynes, beat out Woj, beat out Shams, said that free agent Otto Porter Jr. reached an agreement with the Toronto Raptors, a 2-year deal with the second year being a player option. And aside from joining one of the best well-ran franchises in the NBA, another reason that made the signing with the Toronto Raptors a little bit easier is his wife. His wife is from Toronto, so gotta give a spicy Pele of the off season. I don't know if you can do that to Otto Porter Jr.'s wife, because bringing him in here I think is a nice acquisition for the Toronto Raptors. Now, who is Otto Porter Jr.? A lot of people might remember him from past playoff battles with the Washington Wizards, because he spent some time down there. We played those 2 playoff series, one in 2015 when Paul Pierce was on that roster and stuff, and then again in 2017, I want to say 2018. But so we've had some battles against Otto Porter Jr. He actually signed a max contract back then. It was on a massive deal for those Wizards teams. Ended up bouncing around a little bit, played for the Magic, played for the Bulls, played for, obviously, then moved to the Golden State Warriors last season. And I want to say rejuvenated his career, because his stats have stayed pretty solid on no matter what team he was on. But the fact he was on a reasonable contract with Golden State, you saw the value that he was providing to that team as a role player. This guy is still very solid at 28 years old. Let's take a peep at the stats, what he can sort of provide out there on the court. 8 points per game, 6 rebounds, solid rebounder at the wing position, and the number that should be most intriguing, right? He's also 1.1 steals per game. I'm going to talk about his defense as well, but 37% from behind the 3-point arc. I've been saying it from all the videos I've made about the Toronto Raptors. We need someone that can come in and provide shooting off the bench. And 37% is very solid. It's a solid percentage above league average, but he's a career 40% 3-point shooter. I think in this Toronto Raptors system, even though he's coming from a Golden State team that also gets you a lot of open looks, I think he'll be able to maintain that 37 to 40% 3-point shooting range. Maybe he goes back to his career averages a little bit coming to Toronto, but a guy that you can bring in, he's 6'8". Right, so he fits that Raptors 6'7" to 6'9" usual height range, and he has a 7'2" wingspan. He's a ridiculous defender. It feels like he's been in the league forever, given the fact he's played for those Wizards playoffs teams. It feels like he's had a whole different career since then, right? It feels like he's been in the league a long time, but he's only 28 years old, has dealt with some injuries, sort of got healthy last season for the Golden State Warriors, even though he did go down with a minor injury and they're in the playoffs for a little stretch, right? But he's an elite defender. His athleticism is not waning by any means, and he can knock down 3-point shots at a very high clip. And the Toronto Raptors, there's still question marks about how much this deal is worth, like how much money we're actually paying Otto Porter Jr. to come in. It's going to be below the mid-level exception. That's what Michael Grange reported. We don't know the specifics in terms of those numbers just yet, but we know it's going to be below $10 million, or that $10 to $11 million range per year. So it's on a reasonable contract to so have him coming off the bench and still be able to maintain, right, the switchability that the Toronto Raptors thrive on their defensive schemes, and providing an ability to knock down some 3-point shots, to get to the rim a little bit too. He's not just a 3-and-D guy. We saw his capabilities of going off the dribble just a little bit, has a nice touch around the rim, can get in the mid-range area a little bit. He is one of the perfect players Masai Ujiri could have brought in to complement this core group. He's not going to demand the ball that much. He's not going to take the ball out of Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam's hands, but he can go in there, he can create for himself a little bit, but mostly he can play off all these guys, space the floor, defend. This is a big acquisition. I was worried the Toronto Raptors were going to have to make trades in order to sort of revamp the bench unit, but we really could run 7 or 8 deep last season, fully healthy. Obviously, in the modern NBA, with health and safety protocols, there's worries that, COVID might be making a comeback next season in terms of taking people out and all that sort of stuff. So health and safety protocols, lots of injuries always happening. If you only have 8 guys that you can really trust, that means throughout the regular season, as we saw this year, there's only really going to be 6 guys on your bench for most games that you can really throw out there and Nick Nurse can feel good about. So having another guy that you can be guaranteed rely upon, obviously we're hoping the likes of Champagnie, Delano Banton, Malachi Flynn step up and can be more reliable for the Toronto Raptors this season. But this is a known commodity. This is a guaranteed baseline of a very solid NBA player that Nick Nurse can throw out there, defend, knock down shots, which will be huge to take a load off of our core guys. And I'm just elated the Toronto Raptors made this move. They acquired him, brought him in on a reasonable contract. Shout out Masai Ujiri making these big W deals. So that's Otto Porter Jr. Otto Porter Jr. coming in, that's what we like to see. Now, what does this mean for the Toronto Raptors for the rest of free agency? Because we had about $30 million to sort of work with, to fool around with. We had to bring back Thaddeus Young. We had to bring back Chris Boucher, which we did. We ended up putting about $20 million into both of those guys annually. So the rest of that, a large chunk of that money is now going to be filled up with Otto Porter Jr. So I don't think there's going to be many other big fish that we could potentially go out and steer in free agency unless someone's willing to take a minimum. We do have another exception that could pay a player around $5 million. So there could potentially be another free agent signing. But as Michael Grange brought up in one of his tweets, it's likely that any other moves the Toronto Raptors make, any other acquisitions that they decide to do, will be via trade. So there is still the potential for one of those big blockbuster deals to go down, right? We don't have the cap space to sort of eat some money or anything like that at this point, but don't be shocked. Don't be surprised if the Toronto Raptors are not done making moves to sort of bolster up that bench that we definitely did a good job at this offseason. Bringing back Chris Boucher, and then obviously adding Otto Porter Jr. to that lineup. And if we do make one of those blockbuster deals, maybe having an Otto Porter Jr. there makes you a little bit more comfortable with letting an OG Anunoby walk, letting Gary Trent Jr. walk, because you have that shooting, you have that defense coming off the bench, or potentially starting if we do a massive shakeup. But I still don't expect the crazy deals to happen, but we're still being thrown around in terms of possible places where Kevin Durant, where Rudy Gobert, where DeAndre Ayton, where Jakob Poeltl could land. So those names are still on the board. So subscribe to Raptors Digest if you want the latest breakdowns on all the news, all the rumors, all the rumblings surrounding this Toronto Raptors team. Apparently the Jazz really want Gary Trent Jr., so that might be a whole video in itself. We got a lot of stuff to look at. The free agency period has been maybe not as crazy as expected as in recent years, because free agency has just been nuclear over the past few seasons, but definitely I like what the Toronto Raptors have done over this offseason. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you like this signing of Otto Porter Jr., assuming it's not like a $20 million? We couldn't have signed him for anything like that. It's likely around a $10 million deal, the player option on the back half of it. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. You're the best to make it this far. Check out the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, all that cool stuff. Anyways, enough of me rambling. I'm signing off. Cheers.